Welcome to the Ray Hanania Radio Show, brought to you by the U.S. Arab Radio Network and sponsored by Arab News, the leading English language newspaper in the Middle East, at arabnews.com. It's Thursday, November 7, 2024, and this is Season 4, Episode 13. This week on the Ray Hanania Show, we discuss the outcome of the presidential elections and what will happen with former President Donald Trump taking the office and Vice President Kamala Harris. Why did she lose? I have two guests, one Democrat and one Republican, who are seasoned political and campaign experts who are joining me today. Thom Serafin, president of Serafin and Associates. His expertise comes from years of hands-on experience, first as a network radio correspondent covering the Illinois Capitol, and later in the role of press secretary for several U.S. Senate campaigns and a presidential campaign. Thom has served on the staffs of U.S. Senator Alan Dixon and U.S. Representative Dan Rostenkowski in Chicago and in Washington, D.C., and he has advised some of the highest-profile policymakers in Illinois and the nation. Next, with him, because we'll have them both together, is Jeff Davis, president of Victory Media of Illinois, who began his political career in the administration of Illinois Governor James Thompson. A seasoned strategist, Jeff Davis has supported Republican candidates across the country and collaborated with national conservative organizations on campaigns, election integrity, and GOTV, get out the vote, activities. His recent focus, however, has been on battleground states like Georgia, a key state in the Trump win. The Ray Hanania Show is broadcast live every Thursday at 5 p.m. on WNZK, AM 690 radio, and rebroadcast on Monday at 5 p.m. on the U.S. Arab Radio in Michigan. It's also available online at arabnews.com/Ray Radio Show and on Facebook at facebook.com/ArabNews. To get more information on me, Ray Hanania, at arabnews.com or on my personal website at www.hanania.com. We will be right back with our guests right after these messages. And welcome, everybody, back to the Ray Hanania Radio Show here at WNZK AM 690 Radio, broadcast on the U.S. Arab Radio Network and sponsored by Arab News, the leading English language newspaper in the Gulf and the Middle East. I got these two great guests that I told you about at the beginning of the program. One is Thom Serafin. He's president of Serafin and Associates. I gave you his bio. And the other is Jeff Davis, president of Victory Media of Illinois. Jeff, Thom, welcome to the program.
Yeah, nice to be here.
This was
thanks, Ray.
You're welcome. This was a really interesting race. I mean, the media had us believing it was close. But when you really look at the results, it wasn't close. I don't know. What do you guys make of why did Trump win and why did Harris lose? What do you think? Jeff, you want to start?
Well, while it was definitely a mandate kind of margin, if you look at the Electoral College, if you look at the individual battleground states, he still didn't have a huge win, but he did have a win, and it was from a coalition that he had never put together before. So it was pretty interesting, and that allowed him to actually run better in some of the blue states that were not necessarily targeted states. But everyone knew it was going to come down to 7 states. You had, North Carolina and Georgia, which they were trying to make sure Trump didn't win on the Harris side. Trump had to try and make sure he held those. And then it came down really to Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, and the blue wall that they were talking about. And he seemed to eke it out, which didn't leave Arizona kind of more insignificant than what people thought it would be.
What do you think, Thom?
I thought it was the revenge of the working man and woman around the country. Those people that, don't have somebody always speaking for them. The guys that work 2 jobs, guys that lost their jobs. The automobile workers in Michigan, I was a little bit surprised at those numbers. I was surprised at some of them, the numbers down in Georgia, where he struggled in the last election cycle, Donald Trump and his colleagues. And, the depth of the win to me is shown in the fact that the Senate, even though they had a pretty good layout, a game plan, and they already had an advantage going in, I'm still impressed that they're, right now it's 52-45, and there's still some votes to be counted in some of the elections. So the Republicans will have the Senate, the United States Senate, by at least 2 votes. And on the Democratic side, they're ahead. Now, whether or not they can hold that lead, there's about 30 races outstanding. But when you get farther down the ballot, I thought that really shows the significance of the voter sentiment. And of course, Jeff, you do this for a reason, and your company's named Victory for a reason. So you must really, from an analysis point of view, must really be getting into the numbers and trying to figure out, why did they go here? Why did they go there? I mean, 45% of the Hispanics. Now, I haven't seen more data than the AP, exit polls, but 45%. And when you look at Texas's numbers and Florida's numbers on the Hispanic vote and the Republican vote down there, their pundits are saying it's because of the school choice issue that they're voting in that direction. I don't know the answer to that. You probably do. That's right here, Jeff Davis.
Jeff, what do you think?
Well, I think it's kind of interesting. If you look at, you just mentioned about Texas and Florida, which is, neither one of them was a battleground state,
Right.
But he won Miami-Dade, the first time that's happened in 20 years.
Amazing.
In Texas, he won a county in Texas that is overwhelmingly Hispanic, that has never been won by a Republican candidate.
I know.
And then up in Virginia, during the night, pundits started thinking, oh my gosh, he might pull off Virginia. One of Trump's top political guys, Chris LaCivita from Virginia, ran there. You had Youngkin doing some interesting things with mothers again in the school boards. It goes back to some of that school board stuff, and they use some different types of messaging that it had Virginia in play for a little while. Now Harris ended up winning it, but her margins were much less. She ran behind Biden's numbers by far, almost everywhere. And then also you talk about Hispanics, but if you look at the Black African-American men and that percentages, no one ever thought Trump was going to win that demographic, but going from 8% to 25%.
Wow.
Game over in all these different spots. And that's what seemed to have happened.
Was there any key issue or something that, overall, when you look at the country, was it that Trump focused on the right issue and Harris didn't focus on the right issue? I mean, is there one thing, if you were to point to and said to Harris, you made this mistake, you needed to do that? Is there anything like that at all that might have made a change for her?
I think that old phrase, I feel your pain. She did not exhibit that on the campaign trail. She had the joy and all these other things. But ironically, she wasn't feeling the pain of the average voter that was struggling. Everybody talks about inflation over, everything I learned in college over the last 50 years, 60 years in life is inflation is the hidden pain, hidden taxation. All of a sudden you get your $100 paycheck every week, but the bills are getting higher and higher. You just can't meet ends. And the average guy was having that problem. I mean, the black male, the Hispanic male, the white male, the people that were working 1 or 2 jobs, they just couldn't catch up. They couldn't get ahead. And, I thought at some point, I've worked with, dozens of candidates over my lifetime. And, everybody could memorize a stump speech. Everybody could memorize an answer. She could not memorize a response to what's the difference between your incoming administration and Joe Biden's. I mean, to me, that was a layup. She was asked on 60 Minutes and then several other meetings where she could not identify what she would do differently. And all she had to do is feel the pain. And then down the stretch, with all the Hollywood celebrities kind of reinforce that class issue. I think, like Bernie said, 10 years ago when he was running against, Hillary Clinton for the nomination, it's a class problem. It's not an issue of black versus white. And this election kind of showed that it is a class issue, those who have and those who don't have. So, ironically, she was reinforcing with all the Hollywood stars on stage the difference between those who have and those who don't have. And she never, I feel badly for her because I think she's a nice person, but she never expressed herself to the voters. That she never connected, with those voters. I don't know that part. I just don't get.
Yeah, I think Ray, when it comes down to it, you get down to the end right now with the issues of the campaign. Like, what were they? Like, if you look back in 1992 when Clinton and those guys, it was easy. It's the economy, stupid, and they beat an incumbent Republican president because they focused. The issues at the end of this race were economy, border, protecting democracy, and then abortion. So in 2022, when they thought this red wave was coming, Republicans ignored the abortion issue, and it was something where the Supreme Court had made their decision in June of that year. So it was hot to trot, and it was one of the top issues at the end. And Republicans never saw any kind of Republican wave or red wave. It just wiped it out. Well, now you're talking about economic issues where 70% believe Trump was better on the economy. So that's a winning issue for him. On the border, like same type of numbers. So that's a winning issue on Trump. Protecting democracy, the Harris campaign was pushing that towards the end, but they weren't defining exactly what democracy meant well enough that in the end, a lot of people thought they were protecting democracy by voting for Trump, not for her. And then you sit with abortion at the end, which became minor.
Can you expound on that democracy thing? Because I agree with you on that. And, I talked to a lot of people about democracy because and the AP exit polls is right near the top next to the economy.
Yeah.
And I said, well, somebody asked me about that. And you, correct me here, based on your understanding and research, but democracy for the Democrats is all about January 6th. And for the other side, democracy was about not being told that your daughter had to be in the same locker room with a full-grown male walking around with an erection. I mean, that was, that was the difference in the democracy piece from my vantage point. Tell me what you say, what you think.
Yeah, I think that is too. And then also the justice system, two-tiered justice system. And that's where I think he made his inroads with African American males. Yeah. So they all of a sudden said, "Oh, I've been railroaded by this DA, or I've been this and that." And even when it wasn't an African American male, if you talk about an African American mom whose son they feel was railed by a DA or whatever, and they kept going after, you're a convicted felon, you're terrible, terrible, terrible. They're also going at and eating away at their base. It sounds crazy, but they're criticizing people that have been a sustainable voter bloc for them for years and felt it the same way. And now they're putting Trump into the same bucket as the way they feel. And I think it was a backlash on that. And that they just never saw coming.
Do you think that they pampered Harris? I mean, there was all that talk when Biden stepped down and she was nominated that, she's not good in interviews, so we're going to kind of keep her away. She didn't do a lot of press conferences. She didn't do a lot of interviews. She was kind of choreographed or managed. Do you think that backfired, that she never talked about, it didn't seem like she talked about substance. She talked about headlines. Did that have any impact at all? Was she able to come out and she was a prosecutor. You think a prosecutor knows how to get out there and fight the issues. but it looked like they stripped that prosecutor personality away from her and said, look, let's just avoid falling and you're going to win. It seemed like that was the attitude. What do you guys think?
Well, I will tell you that I think they made a massive mistake at the end of the Democratic National Convention. When it finished, they had a good convention. They were, buoyed by a lot of stuff. It looked good. It was great. And then she took the weekend off. Literally. Didn't go anywhere over the weekend. I remember Bill Clinton and some of these better, and Obama, of course, they finished that convention and they got on bus tours and went to 10 different cities, started driving home. Instead, she went kind of into hiding a little bit. And it might have been because of timing, trying to figure out what the next 120 days or 180 days were going to be like for them. But what that allowed them to do is for the Trump campaign to help define her instead of her defining herself and how she was a separate, how she kind of separated herself from Biden, even though she was part of that administration. She never did that, I don't think.
Tom, do you think she was held back from being what she could have been? Because I just didn't. I saw headlines, abortion, and it seemed like they relied on that a lot. But there were so many other things that she could have addressed. Did she fail in that aspect, you think?
Well, I was at the convention and I did a couple of interviews from there, and I said, this is her high mark. This is the high mark. How much of this can you sustain or hold on to and then grow? So I agree with Jeff. I was surprised with not only the time off initially, but a lot of the time off throughout the campaign when she had plenty of openings. It just, she just didn't take when the guy, dropped his fist, and when he was off guard, they just didn't close. Nowhere did they close. And I think it's more about her personality. She had problems with staff and staffing issues prior, as vice president. And she was difficult, from what I understand, from people to work for to begin with. And whether or not that had to do with her preferences on issues or, whatever, her disagreements with the White House staff that was working for Joe Biden, and maybe just being a vice president, where you're always the second one in the room and you don't have the initiatives that other people have to work with. I'm not going to say she was lazy, but I do say she wasn't confident about the issues. She wasn't confident in her ability to speak, and she was redundant, and she developed what she had earlier on the campaign trail years ago with the word salad situation, where she would just put words together that was bullshit, and somebody should have told her, after a couple of those things, you're going to have to say something, worthwhile, bite into this issue. And there's so many great issues on the campaign trail where you can take the high road and be successful with it, and let the other guy come at you and try to tear down, you from the high road and make him look like the bad guy. She never took those opportunities. And I just don't understand it, over and over again when she had opportunities. And then they started putting her in interviews when people were complaining she wasn't doing interviews. They put her in some dangerous interviews. And I thought to myself, well, they must have some kind of arrangement before they do this. And they must have all talked it out. But then it came out just the opposite. They didn't have an arrangement. And and even when the announcers, the legacy media, who took a big hit in this cycle, when they made the effort to help her out, she didn't pick up on it. When somebody gives you a fastball down the middle, Aaron Judge would, hit that ballpark, way out of Yankee Stadium, but it just didn't happen.
Well, maybe someone on the Dodgers after this, after this World Series, it would have been a Dodger hitting that out of the park.
Freddie,
Judge.
That's
well,
exactly
we see
right.
Serafin as a Sox fan from the cup of coffee that he's drinking from.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
Do you think that the focus of the election was more on Harris rather than on Trump? In other words, what I'm getting at is, oftentimes the past elections and the past interviews, Trump is so obstreperous and he says crazy things and he offends people.
That's a big word.
he's the focus of all
Yeah.
the time, and people
Let me
look
look
at
that
him
up.
and you're against him. It seemed like there was less of that during this election. He was a little nicer, although after the debate, he kind of softened. And after they tried to assassinate him, he really came out swinging. But it seemed like the mistake for the Democrats was they let the focus drop from Trump and focus on Harris. I think more people were talking about Harris and could she do what she wanted to do. Was that a mistake on their part, given that Harris seemed a little weak when it came to the issues?
I would say, Ray, I don't think there's anybody in this country that doesn't have an opinion on Donald Trump, and I don't, so I don't know if they could try and define him in a way that's not already defined. I think it's so I that would be tough. I mean,
But I mean,
what are you going to say about Donald Trump that hasn't been said already?
well, that's what I mean. But I mean, maybe the focus kind of shifted to her because when you
Yeah,
focus on Trump, it's negative. I mean, I think for most people, but the focus seemed to drift away from Trump. And maybe there was that focus on Harris, all the celebrities that surrounded her, Oprah, Michelle Obama, the
Uh,
Clintons, everybody was out there for her. Jimmy Kimmel, they were talking about her. There wasn't a one entertainment program that you didn't see where they Saturday Night Live, everything was about her. It was focused on her. I think that helped Trump. I think
it
that helped
it
take
it
off the
it
focus off of him.
it did, but they focused on the wrong parts of Donald Trump. They dismissed the mail vote as an irresponsible vote that wasn't going to matter because women were coming out in droves on the abortion issue.
correct.
And then the Hollywood elites would come out and talk about the woke, all those issues that were turning voters off, especially in the flyover states, which are all the states that he won, obviously. But I think they dismissed the Hulk Hogan, as cartoonish,
Right.
and they made the males have felt for a long time that they're an integral part of our society and the family units. They dismiss the fact that Hispanics traditionally have always lived with a nuclear family, with 2, 3 families in the same home. They dismiss the fact they treated these voting blocks in a traditional way, the way a lot of political consultants and pundits and candidates have treated it in the past. And I think there's a maturity with the electorate and with everybody in our industry as you continue to grow. It's very, very seldom you see it in advance, but when you look back, you can say, "Wow, we are growing in this particular category. These people do have individual thought ways. We can't treat everybody in this particular category, like the black males. The stories I've read about the black males. I can't believe they were so crucified by the legacy media. I thought they were showing their stuff. I love that those interviews in the barbershops and they were talking about and why they were thinking that way. And then the Hispanics, I love the Hispanic women and the way they talked about the family unit and why they wanted good schools, and they have to go through these schools that the government tells them they have to do it, and they love the choice issue because they will do 4 jobs in order to get their kids in a good school to get a great education. I think too much of a broad stroke. So to answer your question, yes, but for all the wrong reasons.
Jeff, in terms of, I mean, he brought up even the Hispanic vote, the black vote. Um, Trump got more than he got in the past, or more than Republicans have gotten in the past. Does that have to do with them losing a connection with the Democrats, or is it just not enough emphasis by the Democrats was placed on the economy? Not enough emphasis by the Democrats was placed on, immigration. I mean, everybody assumes that every Hispanic supports open immigration and, illegals, but I'm not sure that's the case. I think the Hispanics who supported Trump are in favor of a secure border. They want the economy better, and they also want crime to be lower. They're just like everybody else.
Yeah, I think so. And everyone's talking today the Trump realignment, and he's realigned the Republican Party. And he has on this election, but a true realignment doesn't happen. It has to happen in 2 elections. So in 2 years, if he can still hold on to that coalition, then he's really, really changed it. So it'll be interesting over the next basically 24 months before all those Republican senators up in 2024 of what can they get accomplished and can they satisfy those coalitions that they've put together for this winning coalition.
All right, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll continue the discussion with my 2 guests, Jeff Davis and Thom Serafin, 2 phenomenal campaign election consultants and analysts who are helping us understand what happened in the presidential election. We will be right back right after these messages. And we're back here at U.S. Arab Radio at WNZK AM 690 in Michigan, in Ohio, and in parts of Canada with 2 great guests, Thom Serafin, president of Serafin and Associates, and Jeff Davis, president of Victory Media in Illinois, looking at the elections. Why did Trump win? Why did Harris lose? And what were some of the factors? Jeff, tell us about, your look at the 2 candidates together. How did they compare?
Well, we were just talking off screen a little bit about their work ethic during this campaign, and not that I'm trying to say one is bad and one is good, but I think everyone is surprised. Trump being, in his late 70s, and the schedule that he went through, like he was going 2 and 3 different events across different states every day for the last few weeks. I mean, it's been crazy. Some of her days where they took off, it seemed like right before some big events or a big interview, they literally took her out of public and did some, we assume, some prepping for those things. Trump never seemed to take a break at all since the convention, and I mean, he would tire me out just watching him go around from state to state to state. I think
so. You're talking about his energy level was really much higher than you thought, or higher than hers.
Yeah, I mean, she certainly. I think they sat her down a couple times during the heat of the campaign. So I say the heat of the campaign from basically that convention end to the election day, where she literally took days off. And I think it was to prepare things. I mean, part of that problem is the timeline that she became a candidate. I mean, Trump's been running really since 2015. Right. I mean, it's been a long time. So in her being thrust into the spotlight in August really changed some dynamics, I think, on that side as well.
Thom, the energy level, was it a major factor, you think?
It was, to me, is part of the difference. Absolutely. I mean, down the stretch in the last couple of weeks, I think there was a Saturday where she didn't start till 2:30 in the afternoon. I don't understand that. He would spend 3 hours on a Joe Rogan show taking questions and just freelancing, with other broadcasters and podcasts like yours. And he was working around the clock. I don't know how much he sleeps in the evening, but when you take a look at what he was doing and why he was doing it, he was fighting for his life, literally and figuratively, fighting for his public life, fighting to stay out of jail with all this lawfare that was going on around him, fighting to clear his name, and from his vantage point, fighting to retain and reclaim the White House that he believes was stolen from him. So from his vantage point, he was all in. And if you ever doubted Donald Trump and what happens when he goes all in, a lot of people did, and they made a lot of mistakes on this one. Yeah, the energy level was, incredible for a guy like me that's been involved in that kind of thing. You never sleep on the staff wise, but the candidate was not sleeping either on this one. And you know what? He was smart. He reviewed everything. I mean, he looked at everything, which is amazing because a lot of candidates don't like to get into all the dirty details. He got into all the details. I mean, which is, I used to work for a gentleman who used to always say, don't expect what you don't inspect. And that was his motto as a candidate, which was, amazing.
Was there anything you guys think, before we just shift to a couple other issues, that Trump did wrong? Was there anything that you said, oh, geez, that's bad? Was there an issue or some interview or something that just kind of made you think, okay, this is going to go the wrong way?
Yeah, I wish he had sustained,
well,
after the convention, he had his grandchildren with him. And when you see him with his grandchildren, with his collar open, his tie loose, and with his daughter and his grandchildren, I just love those scenes and the family, the back, the back of the stage.
So he should do that more often.
He should have done that more. He can be a tough guy, but the show that was on television for years, about the mob family that was on Netflix or whatever it was. You remember the success of that show was the family. Sopranos, right? Yeah. The family getting together around the table. I mean, the more you see of him doing that, I thought was terrific. And when he didn't do that and he went out, started, chipping away at people, I said, don't go there. I mean, just don't go there.
Wow. So I have an interesting observation on that, Tom, because I think that is dead on. And I think they realize that. So I spent most of the last month in Georgia, where I got to see all the ads. We're in Illinois, we're in Chicago, we don't see the ads. And one of the big closing ads that Trump had, the final shot, was him at the convention with his grandkids on his lap and Laura Trump in the photo as well. So there's literally two grandkids, him and Laura Trump.
Oh, cool.
So, so someone thought the same thing, softening him up. So, Ray, if you talk about what he could have done better, I think Trump you can point to something he does every week. Yeah. Like, oh, that's going to, you're going to, but the problem for Democrats is that reinforces for them, like, that's why we can't have them. I think the average voter to this point is, that's Trump. They've come to expect it. And I remember, they're talking about this, the comedian at Madison Square Garden that talked about, Puerto Rico. Well, I was actually in Madison Square Garden, and he was a comedian that spoke, I think, I'm just going to be rough here, at 2:15 or 2:30. Trump didn't even hit the stage until 6:30. And there was probably 15 other people that spoke in between that comedian and when Trump hit the stage. Like, you remember it? Remember the line? It went flat inside of Madison Square Garden, and everyone's kind of like, well, that's kind of odd. But by the time you were at three more speakers, you totally forgot about it. But yet it became the narrative for the next 3-4 days. And, it was interesting. I think they focused on different things.
Wasn't it part of the problem, though? The media would pick up on things and really kind of spin it. It wasn't actually Trump that said Puerto Rico was a garbage dump or compared it to garbage. A comedian did that he wasn't even there for, but there were other issues.
Like the bloodbath issue. That was the same thing about Cheney, that he wanted a shooter or whatever. That was good.
Right.
But you know what? The irony is, I was stunned with CBS, Norah O'Donnell, and the legacy. I was just stunned that they would go ahead, on live television and talk about it that way, like we were all rubes. Right. You know what? Thanks to the internet and thanks to all the podcasts, people know better. I mean, they treat the average voter like, they're in the dark, and they're no longer in the dark.
Is this? Do you think it'll change?
To the thing, I think part of the thing you'll see, podcasts. Okay, I think if we would have went back to January 7th, 2021, no one, if we took this recording of this interview and saying Trump won, it would be like, there's the biggest fantasy
Right.
of anyone, because he was such an outcast. People were going to run for him. This is definitely got to be the greatest comeback of any political career ever. But what they did, they knew they couldn't get any kind of fair assessment or coverage on mainstream media. They went right to these podcasts. And when he sat down with Joe Rogan, he sat down for 3 hours. And he sat for Theo Vaughn. Theo Vaughn is someone who's an addict, who asked him about his brother, like his brother was an addict. He says, what do you think about, about that brother? And he says, I'm sorry for asking him. He's apologizing for asking. And Trump, you didn't see the bombastic nature of Trump at that point. He was like, no, if this can help one person, that's fine. He was very calm. He was much more in his element. It was more of kind of a one-on-one kind of meeting type stuff that people got to see him in a completely different light. And they then decided to focus on those different podcasts that they could go after the target market that they were looking for. So they really use those podcasts to get out messages that they couldn't get through any kind of other messaging or any channels.
His instincts are so good, making French fries and waving outside the window at McDonald's. To me, that's one of the best photographs, next to him getting into the garbage truck, with his reflecting vest on.
Right.
That he was the one guy. He reminds me of my old neighborhood in Milwaukee. There were always little fights with everybody in the different neighborhoods, but there was always one guy that everybody rallied around, that people would pick on all the time and break the windows on the house. But he always came out. He was always ready to fight, win, lose, or draw. He was going to fight, and he was going to represent that neighborhood. And it didn't matter, how many bruises he took. He never backed down. The guy was across the street. He'd cross the street and talk to them. And he did that for everybody in this country that felt, that they've been picked on by the IRS, the feds, the local cops, if they got pinched, driving the car, whatever it was. And every time they called him a felon, I thought to myself, what a mistake, because everybody knows he's only a felon because the Democrats want him to be one. It wasn't because he was legitimately a felon. And so I thought that was always a mistake when she called him that way, and some other people. And after a while, they stopped doing that because they probably tested that term, and it backfires.
Right. And right now, it looks like the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are at crucial crossroads. Probably the Republican Party, it looks like they're going to take the House. So they're going to have the Senate, the House, and the White House. But then 2 years from now, we have that midterm election that always kind of votes against the incumbents, and maybe the Democrats can take it back. But during these first 2 years, he's going to be able to do almost anything he wants if he wins the House. What do you think are the top 3 things he's going to want to do in his first year, assuming that he takes the House and he doesn't have to fight as hard as he might have to? What do you think, Tom or Jeff? Either one.
I think there's going to be a couple. There's going to be a couple tiers. There's going to be a couple tiers, and just understand, in 2024, Ray, there are a lot more Republican senators up than there are Democrats. So holding the Senate, although they're building such a lead that if they can hold on, that might be tough to overcome. But the House is always, I think they're going to hold on to the House. It's going to be razor thin. They've had different factors within that Republican coalition that hasn't been able to stick together. So it may be a different situation with Trump and as president. But I think a couple things. The biggest thing I think he's going to have, he has the Senate so he can get his cabinet. And the cabinet's going to be very important for him, and especially whoever's AG and all these different people. So one of the criticisms about the Trump one thing was personnel. They didn't fill enough people. They didn't hire enough people, and they hired the wrong people. So that's been a major focus of them getting ready for this. But I think you're going to see, oil and energy issues that they can do. You're going to have some things that they can do immediately by executive order, and then they're going to try and do the border. They're going to try and do some of these other issues, maybe some tax stuff. But then they're going to have to try and codify that in legislation to try and make it long term while if they hold on to both houses and the Senate. So it'll be a couple two-tiered, and then they have to be able to go and satisfy that wide coalition that they have now built, the Robert F. Kennedy voters, Junior Kennedy voters, that now have come on, and they're not Trumpers, they're not Republicans, but they want to see certain things with the FDA and with the different food and drug stuff, that they're going to determine whether Trump was just giving them bad hopes, or is he going to deliver?
Tom, the Democrats are at a crossroads, it seems. What are they going to do? I mean, if you were there to tell them what they need to do, because I think they're in a shambles over this. What do they do? What do they have to do to change and reverse what happened over the next 4 years?
I think they need some young blood inside their think tanks, number one. They still, they've been saddled with the Clintons and the Obamas way of thinking. And not that those two, former presidents were nice people, but you can't, this is 2024. You've got to have a different approach to life. And they should take, what they do in karate, you should take the momentum of the person that you're dealing with and take that momentum and turn it around on them. So there's a lot of opportunity, especially if you're in the minority in the Congress, to talk about immigration, to talk about the new immigration law. What are we going to do with the Dreamers? And be an advocate for immigration, but have a strong point of view and use some of your younger people to start identifying them who can be leaders in the party in the future. You're going to have to deal with, the war in Ukraine and the war in the Middle East. And he's made promises to deal with those two issues immediately. He's probably already on the telephone with Zelensky. You saw Zelensky's statement yesterday, the day before, where he's congratulating Trump, but appealing that the war goes on. Yeah. I mean, there's billions and billions of dollars over there that are unaccounted, so if I'm the Democrats, let's do an accounting, something that they've denied doing for the last 2 years. Now let's put an accounting system together. They should take advantage of those opportunities and identify their young people. Donald Trump, yesterday announced that he's going to put together a 250-year birthday party for the United States, and he's going to go to Iowa in the fairgrounds and put it on there, and he's going to have every high school athlete in the country show up, and they're going to have games all over the country. Well, coincidentally, that's right when those elections are coming up in the off year, and it's right in the heart of the country. And all those young people are going to come from all the hearts of the countries and the small little fairs in Georgia and Nebraska and everywhere else. To me, that's a genius move, and it's a genius move to get that organized now, because that's an opportunity to organize your troops on the ground. And celebrate the anniversary of the birth of America. I think on oil, he's got to immediately release some land. He's got to put this thing back on schedule the way he was doing, 5 years ago when we became energy independent. I think he can do that within 18 months, with the ability of, the signing the letters, et cetera. And he also can go to Congress and get some of those things together. It's the same thing on the border. They can start dealing with the border immediately and see results in less than 6 months. And when he talks about immigration and being legally, he's going to have to do both. The one thing that Obama failed to do, and he admits it to this day, he was elected with a veto-proof majority in the House and Senate. As he had veto-proof majorities, it's not happening veto-proof this time, but he's got the opportunity to do something like that. He said, I should have done more than just healthcare. So Donald Trump has to have 4 or 5 agendas. And I think having the Senate he's got the opportunity to put some very strong people in cabinet positions. You know, you got to take Merrick Garland out of the Justice Department. The Justice Department has got to be cleaned up. The FBI has got to be cleaned up. And so you're going to have somebody who's going to be a tough nut over at the Defense Department. Secretary of Defense is I think is so critical today to deal with the military industrial complex, and so, the Secretary of State, Blinken is gone. I mean, we got to get back to somebody who understands the world stage and understands the history of the world and where we're positioned and where we're not positioned.
Biden was a weak leader, wasn't he? I mean, and when internationally, didn't that kind of impact all these different conflicts that started? I mean, what did they do with the Middle East? I mean, Trump says he's going to end it right away. He managed to get several peace accords done with the Middle East. The big prize is Saudi Arabia, if they can bring Saudi Arabia to the table with Israel. He seems very confident that he can do that. Do you guys expect him to make changes in the Middle East and even in the Ukraine war?
Well, I think he's well respected, especially in Israel. I mean, when he was president last time, Jerusalem became the capital. I mean, there's a lot of good blood there, and he thought they were coming to an accord where they would have the long-term peace at the time, and everything blew up, on October 7th, when they thought they were getting very, very close. But I think you need, somebody who's full time there who can go toe to toe with Netanyahu, and I think he's the guy who can do that. And the key there is the hostages that are still alive. I think, he's got good access to Iran. He's got good access to some of those proxy terrorist groups for Iran. And he's going to have to do, some communicating there. But if he's capable of reaching the Israelis, and I think he is, that's the key. If he can get Israel to be accommodating to what he needs to do, I think you can bring peace, at least a ceasefire, to that part of the world.
What do you think, Jeff?
Well, I agree with everything Thom just said, but I also want to let's talk about Michigan a little bit because of the population centers in Michigan being Arab American and how Trump did well there, and he did well there, but he won those areas. But I want to say Dearborn, for example. He only got 42.48%. Harris, though, 36.26%. And then the biggest one, Jill Stein, 18.27% in Dearborn. So Trump still has some ways to go in that with Arab Americans. And although he was way ahead of Harris there. I mean, Harris way. I mean, people just decided I can't vote for Trump, but I can't vote for her.
Right.
So Jill Stein, who runs at 0.04 nationwide in Dearborn, Michigan, runs at 18.2%. Yeah. That's where those micro targeting that the Trump campaign did work.
And Trump has a big organization, Arab Americans for Trump. His son-in-law is Arab. He has his son-in-law's father working with. They're building a coalition. That might give them a voice to help Trump when he deals with Israel and possibly brings the Israelis back around to maybe looking back at a peace or two-state solution or resolving that. And if they do that, then Saudi Arabia steps in and says, yes, we'll. That's the big prize, I think, for Israel. So you might be right doing that. Are we going to see any names in terms of, we saw a lot of celebrity names like Liz Cheney. She was all over the place. Is she gone? Is that it for her? Or just, we don't know. Hillary Clinton, I heard Hillary say some really nice things about Trump, not about Trump, but we need to work with him. He's our president. We need to make him successful. Has this opposition to Trump changed? You think because it was so aggressive before the election?
Well, I think Republicans were saying before the election that they had the greatest trade ever. We gave away Liz Cheney, and we got Elon Musk, and Joe Rogan, and RFK Jr. And that's the greatest trade in all of politics, and it probably was. I think Liz Cheney, who Democrats despise her husband,
Yeah,
or her father, not her husband.
I thought it hurt.
I mean,
I
that
thought
had
it
to
hurt
be
Harris.
flat.
I thought she hurt Harris actually, because there were people that didn't like her. We only got like a minute and a half left, and each of you, I just want to give you. I know
Yeah.
I've been asking all the questions. Anything that you wanted to say about this election, Tom? We'll start with you first.
Yeah, I'd love to ask Jeff one more question.
Go ahead.
He was on the campaign trail, some of the hot states like Georgia. You were in Madison Square Garden and all that. This is an election that redefines our elections systems, the way we communicate. I think the end of a long run for the legacy media. There's new ways of communicating, new young people getting into it. It's a generational shift. All those things you were in the middle of. What did you walk away with and say to yourself, I never thought I'd be there in this kind of situation? What did you see that first time that really surprised the hell out of you as a guy who's been around for a long time doing it?
The redemption of Trump. I mean, the fact of the matter is, I was at the Capitol myself January 4th, 2 days before. I was not in Washington, D.C. on January 6th, but I can't imagine having them navigate that path of a comeback from January 6th/7th to 2 days ago. I've never seen it. I've never believed it was possible 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And going into the race, I honestly thought he was going to do well, and I thought he was going to win. So there's a lot of different activities that went into that, but it was the redemption of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else, Tom, Jeff?
No. I'm looking forward to. I'm in the business of communication, so I'm really interested in where we go from here and how you communicate with the electorate, with the public, and all those new methods and platforms that are available out there.
Yeah.
Jeff, you've been doing it for a while. You've seen that transition. I'm overwhelmed by the opportunities that are available to everybody at any age and any level now.
In any slice of the electorate or any of the slice of the demographics, right, you have an opportunity to do it.
We're doing it today with Ray Hanania.
All right,
that's
guys.
right.
I want to thank my two guests. And Tom, is there a place people can go if they want to get more information about you? Is there a website that they should go to?
Yeah, Thom at Serafin.com. Serafin, Thom at Serafin.com.
And Jeff, any place where people can go to get more information about what you're doing?
Yeah, victorym.com. It's just Victory Media, but it's victorym as a media.com.
All right. My two guests, Thom Serafin, president of Serafin and Associates, and Jeff Davis, president of Victory Media. I want to thank both of you guys for joining us here on radio and talking about the election. I look forward to talking to you guys again sometime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
gentlemen.
Ray.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Ray Hanania Radio Show, brought to you by the U.S. Arab Radio Network and sponsored by Arab News, the leading English language newspaper in the Middle East at arabnews.com. I hope you enjoyed our two guests, one Democrat and one Republican, Thom Serafin, president of Serafin and Associates, and Jeff Davis, president of Victory Media, who discussed the expected actions of our president-elect, Donald J. Trump, and why did Kamala Harris, the vice president, the Democrat, lost the election. Enjoy the show. Remember, Ray Hanania Show is broadcast every Thursday at 5 p.m. right here on WNZK AM 690 Radio and rebroadcast on Monday at 5 p.m. Please check us out at arabnews.com/Ray Radio Show and Facebook at facebook.com/Arab News, and get more information on me by visiting hanania.com. Have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye.
ArabNews.com, bringing you breaking news from across the Middle East and the latest on Arabs in America. Get inside the latest headlines with expert analysis and insights at ArabNews.com. Join over 5 million Facebook fans and over 10 million monthly readers. ArabNews.com, news that matters to you.
Arab news columnist and writer Ray Hanania will host a special focus on the U.S. presidential elections every week on the Ray Hanania Radio Show, presented by the U.S. Arab Radio Network on WNZK AM 690 Radio in Michigan and brought to you by Arab News Newspaper. Every Thursday from 5 till 6 p.m. on WNZK AM 690 AM Radio, experts from elected officials to political analysts will analyze the presidential election campaign, as well as the results and aftermath, assessing policies that will impact Arabs and Muslims in America and the Middle East. Join us every Thursday at 5 p.m. on WNZK AM 690 Radio for the Ray Hanania Radio Show, special on the presidential elections. Get to know more about the show at ArabNews.com.